like to welcome everyone to the Madison Fire District's regular meeting, September 15th, 2021 at 7 p.m., or 7:06 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mr. Adams.
He-
Mr.
He has another commitment.
Mr. Anderson.
Here?
Mr. Gontner.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Vest.
Yes.
Mr. Wayman.
He has another commitment. He won't be here this evening. If everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would everyone please join me in a moment of silence? Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes for August 18th, 2021 regular session? Is there a motion?
You have that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Gontner.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Vest.
Yes.
May I have a motion to approve the bills and payroll for August 2021? Bills at $76,950.08. Lake County tax, $9,189.86. And payroll, $145,539.41, for a total of $231,679.35. Is there a motion?
You have that motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a little. Clarification on Lake County tax.
That is the property tax, when the fee they charge for collecting our property taxes?
Okay, not on the property, but the fees we get, just making sure that we weren't paying that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Gontner.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Vest.
Yes.
Okay, we move into the August 2021 financial report. Ms. Clapp.
Okay, I'm reading from the fund summary report. We have, we started August fund at $5,581,559.71. Our month-to-date revenue was $1,189,469.66. That is because we did get our property taxes in. Our year-to-date revenue is $4,232,921.18. Again, our month-to-date expenditures is $231,679.35. Our year-to-date expenditures is $1,918,260.16. So we started September with $606,539,350.02.
Any question for Ms. Clapp? Okay, we'll move into open public portion. Anybody from public?
No one?
No, nothing. Okay, we'll move to legal counsel. Mrs. Dame?
I was asked to prepare 2 resolutions for this evening. They're before you under new business. Other than that, I don't have anything to report.
Thank you. Under old business, Station 2 renovation addition project and bids received. Chief, you want to elaborate?
Sure. We had 4 people complete bids. Andrew was here from CT Consultants when Joanne and I opened the bids. A copy of CT's bid sheet is in front of you. 2 qualified and were within the 10%, 2 were not. Andrew took the bid specs, or the bids back with him. They're going to review them. He said in about 7 to 10 days, they would email me and I will forward to the board their recommendation. The 2 people that are within, or that are qualified, are the James Martin Contractor Services LLC and Metis Construction Services. Both contractors are people that CT is familiar with and has worked with before, so that's good. They're going to go through and make sure that they met all the criteria of the bid specifications, make the recommendation, And my recommendation to the board, perhaps to keep the pressure on CT to meet the time frame, would be to consider perhaps a special meeting on, I believe it was September 29th. So that gives them 7 to 10 days to get the recommendation to us. That gives you time to review the recommendation, rather than waiting till the meeting in October. That could at least get us a head start on selecting the contractor and hopefully getting the project started. But I'd be happy to answer any of the questions. You can see alternate 1 and 2. For the most part, everybody was off on what their estimate was. But I did look at the total of the base alternate 1 and alternate 2. Both James Martin and Metis combined still fall within 10%. So that would be something Ms. Dame would have to make a recommendation for. But I expect to hear from Andrew in a week or so.
Any questions for Chief?
N-
Mr. Gunn?
Yeah, I think, Chief, it's a good idea that we do call a special meeting to keep the ball rolling. I don't want to wait till October, whatever it is, for October 20th to
yeah.
award this, so. if,
That keeps the pressure on CT to meet some time.
Well, yeah, it does, and we kind of can get ground broken before the really bad weather gets here, if all works out right. Obviously, you got, Stacy's gonna have to review contract documents, and we're gonna have to make sure the bid bonds and everything is good, but, once we award, it's probably another 3 weeks or so before you get through all that, and they can actually start construction, and then it's gonna depend on materials, that's the next big problem. Lumber's going down, but I was just talking to Dan Nichols, who's a local resident here, who works for an electrical firm. As a matter of fact, Max and I met with him earlier this week about an issue at our township building. And plastic is becoming a real problem as far as getting like breakers for breaker panels. We had a road project on Lake Road West, was supposed to start the end of August. It's a drainage and repaving project, and it's been pushed back because the contractor can't get the plastic pipe. So, yeah, the sooner we get this going, the better, just because material shortages are starting to show up in the construction industry now.
Andrew also mentioned that while lumber prices are coming down, depending on what the federal government does here in the next couple of weeks, the costs are probably going to go up significantly again.
Yeah,
So probably the sooner the better.
I agree. Shoot, I just drove by the gas station. The gas was $2.80 something yesterday, and it's $3.11 at Walmart right now.
Yep.
What's going on?
Also, too, I saw today that price of aluminum is going up and we're scarce on aluminum, if you're gonna do your aluminum 2x4s, if that's what they use, or
Well, you're soft at work
soffit
around
and
the
all that.
outside.
Yep,
Yeah.
so saw that today.
Yeah, should we make a,
Motion.
Mr. Chairman, should we make a motion? Were you recommending the 29th of?
I would
September?
recommend the 29th. He said 7 to 10 days. The 29th is 2 weeks.
Is that a Wednesday?
That's a Wednesday.
Okay.
And I can then contact him and let him know tomorrow that we did schedule a special meeting for the 29th so that we kind of keep this on track and don't lose any more weeks.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that the board set a special meeting for September 29th at 7:00 PM to review the bids and the award of the addition to Fire Station Number 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just want to ask, this is bidded out and as prevailing wage, correct?
Yes.
But it has to be
I
marked.
know, I was just
Yeah.
making sure.
Yeah, no, it's actually in the specs too, the
Okay,
prevailing wage
okay,
stuff, yeah.
just making sure, that's all.
And I think that's one of the things that they're going to go through and make sure that they met the specifications.
Exactly, bonding and otherwise.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yes, I don't want to fall into what you guys fell into,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Any other discussion?
Not to me.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Gauntner.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Vest.
Yes.
Okay. Any further old business? Okay, go into new business, full-time hiring expansions. Chief Baker, you want to elaborate on that?
So we had an officers meeting, and one of the big discussions at the officers meeting again was staffing, and so the board is aware we did make some modifications to our schedule. Our goal is to try to get 6 people in the station. I don't know if you've looked at the budget worksheet that was provided, but We're about 10% under budget right now for staffing. And one of the things that we're going to try to do in the last quarter here is we're trying to open up a sixth spot to allow for some overtime if we have people who are willing to fill it, not mandating people, but with a goal of trying to have 3 people at each station. We went through quite a spell here where there were 3 people at one station and 2 at another. I'll be honest with you, 2 people makes me very nervous because one back injury is going to cost significant money and hardship for somebody. So we've modified the scheduling a little bit. We're going to monitor over the next 2 or 3 months to see what that does and how that impacts the budget. But again, the goal is to try to improve the service to the community and make sure that we have a safe staffing number. We also discussed the addition of full-time staff. We continue to lose part-time staff at probably a record pace. I will tell you, we did just hire one more part-timer, or we made a tentative offer to one more part-time person. We can't find paramedics anywhere. We're hiring people that are less qualified than we've ever hired because that's the only thing that's available. And one of the things that we looked at was the addition of 3 more full-timers. And I know we've just hired 3 in April with a goal of stabilizing staff. But the other thing is I don't think that we could project that we would lose 6 or 8 part-timers in a period of 6 months. We're probably about ready to lose 2 more, one for sure that I know of who's a big hour eater. And I've just traveled through northeastern Ohio doing some education, and this is a very common theme. So we looked at the budget. I'd like to get the board's blessing to continue the process of looking into the expansion. There are some concerns. There are some concerns about federal money, mandates with vaccinations, EMS billing. Those are variables that we depend on, $500,000 a year from EMS billing that we have no control over. Health insurance, I talked to Katie Cook from CBI or CBZ, whatever they're called now. She did let me know that this is going to be the last year that we're going to be able to maintain the plan that we have because we've been grandmothered into the plan. So there are going to be some significant changes in 2023 to healthcare. I don't know what those changes are, and I don't think we can predict the changes. So there is some risk with hiring additional folks, but we also have the flexibility of not replacing people when they retire. I think the budget can support 3. I think it's going to make things a little bit tighter. As you can see, based off Joanne's report, financially, we're in a pretty good position. I think having money in the bank and not having staff in the station probably isn't necessarily serving the community to the best. So I guess I'm looking for the board's blessing to kind of continue the process, to give some good budget numbers, looking at 1, 2, and 3 people, adding into the staffing to see what that looks like, you know, next year, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Because I think, you know, making a commitment to hiring full-timers, we need to make a commitment to having the funding to continue to keep those full-timers. But to be honest with you, right now, and there's 2 officers here that can speak up. I don't know whether, or actually 3, because Captain Sopko's there. I really don't know what other options we have. And I can tell you overtime is nice, and I'm sure some of these gentlemen and ladies enjoy that. But we can't live on overtime, and we can't expect these guys to be picking up some of the hours they are, because there is some physical and mental wear and tear that, you know, dollars don't necessarily fix. So I don't know whether the board has an interest in us continuing down this process and looking at these folks. If there's concerns, I'm willing to answer whatever questions I can answer, at least right now. Yes, Mr. Lee.
Chief, you've got my total support. You know, when it comes to manpower, I think, you know, I mean, just looking at our numbers, our financial numbers, if we were, you know, in the other direction, then we'd have to be very concerned. But I think we have the monies to start moving in the direction of hiring 1, 2, or 3 new full-time. My question is, when might you do that hiring?
Well, if the board has an interest in us continuing, I would like to have some hard numbers for the board to look at for the next meeting.
Okay.
So that, you know, essentially what I'm looking for today is that something that's palatable to the board. I am out of options. I can't generate bodies anymore. There's no, I think when contracts come up, that's one of the other things that collectively as the officer group we need to look at. You know, budgetarily, unfortunately, there's a supply and demand issue. If we want to have people in the fire station, it's going to cost the community dollars. But right now, the least expensive method, which is part-time, isn't, there isn't anybody. And we're competing with the likes of Mentor and Willoughby. Actually, we're competing with the likes of Mayfield Village, Mayfield, Valley View, Cuyahoga Heights. To give you an example of how bad things are, Cuyahoga Heights Fire Department is looking to hire 6 people. Cuyahoga Heights at one time was the highest paid in Cuyahoga County. They run about 600 calls a year. As of a week ago, when I talked to their chief, they had 2 applicants. 2. They don't even have enough applicants to fill the positions.
Well, Chief, you have my, I think you need to do it. From my, you know, retired from my position, been there, done it, know what it's like, and I understand where you come from.
And I'll be happy to get you some good, hard numbers to look at. I just don't want to waste my time, because there's a lot of time in looking at that budget and projecting out years. And if it's not palatable to the board, then I'm not going to spend any effort to do that. But if it's something that the board is open to, I will get you some numbers here, some good solid numbers. We can project out a couple of years with what we can guess at. Again, I can't guess at healthcare cost. But I think if we don't take some kind of action, we're going to burn out the people that are here. We're probably going to get people hurt. And honestly, I'm not sure that we're only one guy getting hurt away from being in big trouble, because there's people that are going to make a lot of money this year because of a lot of overtime.
Right. You got my blessing. Mr. Butner or Mr. Vest, do you have anything?
Myself, you know, I want to look at the numbers. You know, I mean, I just recently here with, you know, we hired 3, okay, and I kind of was under the impression that that was going to kind of help us over the hump. And
Well-
now we're coming to a conclusion down the road here where maybe this isn't going to do what was anticipated, and I would have liked to have seen us, and I'm not trying to be difficult, but I would like to have seen, if you thought you were going to need 4 or 5, okay, because that's what it's ultimately is coming to, or 6, okay, that we would, you know, I'm a little more aware, and I think that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I
But,
didn't
mean,
anticipate
did you not
losing.
anticipate what has happened here, or did you have any idea at the time that perhaps we were going to need these types of?
So the biggest problem was that I don't think and I'll let the officers speak up, I don't think that we anticipated losing a third of our part-time staff. And that's the problem, is when you lose, this department historically has been a part-time department supplemented by full-timers. And this year alone, and I think Captain Sopko, if you can speak up, I think, what do we have, are we down to like 18 part-time people now? 18? We used to have 40. And we used to have a lot of people that worked, 100 hours in a 2-week period of time. Now, out of the 18 people, I would venture to bet that probably 9 or 10 of them don't work much more than 24 or 36 hours a month. So the tough part is the people that we've lost, and we lost a lot of them to full-time jobs. We lost a lot of people that work 200 hours a month, and there's nobody to, in April, I think when we did this in April, we weren't in bad shape, but over the course of the last 5-6 months, I mean, we've lost pretty much all of our young folks to full-time jobs because, as I mentioned, Cuyahoga Heights can't find people to hire. So I didn't anticipate losing a third of the part-time staff.
Of course not. We can't.
And I don't know, again, I think that there's probably 2 more people that are going to be gone.
To full-time positions?
Well, what happens is a lot of the young folks get full-time jobs and they like it here and they, you know, they're gonna stay, they're gonna stay, they're gonna stay. But when a young person gets a full-time job at a Mentor and they're making $75,000 a year working every third day, they decide that maybe they don't wanna stay.
Well, sure.
And I can't blame them for that, but we've got some older people that it's just been time to move on. We've got some folks that have gone to other departments. And you can't necessarily project, you know, we still have a few young folks that are probably only a year or two away from getting their full-time job. And that's the part that's hard to project. But right now, it's pretty easy to project that we're gonna be in a problem because we can't retain people. We can't retain people part-time when there are full-time jobs in the abundance that are available. And, you know, I don't blame any of them. I don't blame any of them for leaving.
No, no, of course not.
But in the past, there's always been a stack of applications.
Okay, then when you're making those hard numbers, can you also show and reflect the impact on the budget and a long-term,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where I'm saying, okay, so we're gonna hire this guy or gal, and they're going to move forward here, and this is the impact, and because, you know, I don't wanna dry up the revenue stream, because, you know, as we know, in the budget, the most expensive part of that is personnel. So between that and healthcare and everything else, and, you know, it would be very difficult for me to want to go back to the public and ask once again, you know, at this early date, you know. I'd like to see-
Well, and I think, I still project that it's probably gonna be 2024 or 2025, we're gonna have to renew a levy.
Okay,
I don't think that we're gonna need to do anything before then, but I do think in either 2024 or 2025, based on the projections that we made a couple years ago when we looked 10 years out. And that was one of the reasons that when I went and sold the last levy to different groups, I promised them that it wouldn't be while I was here, I'll be gone. So somebody else can do that levy. But again, if you think about it though, the employees are they're our most expensive asset, but they're also the most important
oh,
asset.
absolutely, the only thing, without it, we don't exist.
Right.
Okay,
And that's the problem now, is we're really burning out. That's why we made the change with adding that overtime option for full-time and part-time guys to fill that sixth spot, because we're really burning people out. Our volume has been up about 30% in our staffing. If you remember when Chief Lutz was here, we used to have a staff of 10. We're now running probably 25 or 30% more calls, and we're doing it on many days with a staff of 5. So we're doing it at 50 or 60% of what our staffing used to be, and we're doing 30% more. So something's gonna break, and what I don't want to happen is I don't want the employees to be what breaks.
Okay, agreed. Very good, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Gott.
Yeah, Chief, I'm all for you looking into what it's gonna cost to bring on some more people. You know, I agree with Mr. Vest that we need to look at the budget hard, but I also look at the numbers and I see that, for instance, in August, we had 355 calls. That's 11 and a half calls a day, almost 12 calls a day.
And that's about a 30% increase from the
Yeah,
previous
and
3 years.
I'm seeing that, and that tells me we can't sustain that very long at all. And I understand there is no way you would have been able to anticipate losing all the part-timers that we lost. That's just, the market is very difficult out there for policemen and firemen. I read a lot of government periodicals. I'm a bit of a government nerd. And the common theme from coast to coast, be it police or fire, is nobody can find enough people, and nobody can staff where they need to be. No one wants to be a police officer or a firefighter anymore, and you can hardly blame them with all the stuff that's going on in the world. And it's going to become more and more difficult. But I don't know how we're going to continue to sustain the kind of increased call volume we have without putting more people on. And if we can't serve the public, which is our main purpose, we might as well close the door to Station 2 and Station 3 and say, we're done. I'm going to be a little selfish here, and I'm going to put my township trustee hat on for a minute, but the vast majority of the calls that we answer are in the township. And I've got to answer to those people in the township. And we've got to be able to, and I'm not discarding anybody in the village, because quite honestly, the village residents vote for us too, and there are constituents as well. But we we gotta be able to answer to the public, and if we can't get there when Mr. Smith's having a heart attack or a stroke, we've got a problem. So I say we gotta look at it for sure. Hopefully, we'll have a full board in place when that decision is made. You know, these are kind of things you don't want to make with a partial board here, but I definitely, Chief, feel we need to look into it, and the sooner the better.
And I'll have you some numbers either late next week or early the week after. It's just trying to project it through for at least 5 years takes a little bit of time. And I agree with you, Mr. Gautner. That's my concern, is we are in an unsustainable path.
Yep.
And quite honestly, I don't know that hiring 3 more full-timers right now is going to help us a year from now. If our volume continues to expand the way our volume continues to expand, and what hurts us is some of the neighboring communities are experiencing the same thing. So where you used to be able to depend on Northwest Ambulance to help you or Perry to help you, you know, they're in the same, everybody's in the same boat. So there's going to be a time when we don't have somebody to answer a call.
I mean, look at the city of Cleveland and their EMS response. I mean, it's a joke. I'm glad I don't live in the city of Cleveland, but there's hardly a week that doesn't go by where there's not a story about the EMS didn't get there in time or they didn't get dispatched in time, and they have all kinds of manpower issues. It's, again, like I said, I read a lot of government periodicals, and this is a common theme from California to New York.
And just to kind of add on to this is one other thing as a group of the elected officials for the community. We really need to pay attention to what happens to the Madison ER, because if there's a decision made that impacts that Madison ER, that is going to hugely impact the operation of Madison Fire. I've not heard, I've been told that that's going to be open for at least 7 years. I would encourage you all as the elected officials to keep an ear to that, because if somewhere down the line University Hospital decides to make some type of change, having that freestanding ER in Madison gets our folks back in service really quickly, and losing that asset for the community doesn't just hurt the community, it really will impact the fire department.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think about that, but if you got to run to Geneva or Tri-Point,
Right.
you've got a lot of downtime now.
Right.
And it seems to me, just and again, I live right off of Green Road, but I hear the sirens constantly, especially on the weekends, and it seems sometimes it's one call after another after another. I mean, it's not uncommon to hear the sirens go by twice in an hour.
16 to 18 calls a day hasn't been uncommon.
Yep.
And again, with 5 or 6 people on, that workload is tough. And the nursing homes continue to be an issue because the private ambulances have an issue. So we're in a perpetual spiral. So I will work on that information. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Any other questions for the chief on that?
No, just a statement. I hope that university stays true to their word and makes their commitment to Madison more than just words. You know, 'cause he sat right there and promised us. Okay, so let's see.
I can have him at the next meeting if you guys would like.
It doesn't do any good. He's all lip service to me. Sorry to do that in the public, but it's the truth.
Anything else on that? No. Okay, we'll move into the resolution. Ms. Dana.
The first one is Resolution 21-21, a resolution authorizing the chief of the Madison Fire District to purchase a 2022 Polaris Ranger 1000 with accompanying QTAC 85E SC skid, as well as a trailer to haul said equipment in an amount not to exceed a purchase price of $26,000, and authorizing payments provided therein. I'll defer to the chief for further comment on that.
So we currently have, I believe it's a 2002 Kawasaki Mule that's served this community pretty well. In the back of the said mule, Lieutenant Henry, I believe it was, built a skid load for us that has a pump and a 50-gallon poly water tank on it. It's a carbureted motor. It served us well, but it really has become an unreliable, stalls a lot. We've had maintenance done. It's served its time. We're looking to try to replace that. The current mule, you have to pull the rear skid out, and you have to put somebody in a basket, and somebody has to ride in there and hold the basket. And it really served its purpose 20 years ago when we needed something. It's time for that to be replaced. One of the things that we did in the officers' meeting is we talked about the vehicle replacement plan. One of the things that we decided to do was push back the squad purchase. If you recall, we pushed a squad purchase back last year to this year. We've decided to push that squad. We're trying to stretch our dollars as best we can. So we've decided to push the squad back again. But one of the things that needed addressed this year was the mule. We have used that Kawasaki mule probably more this year than we've had in the last 5 years combined. Unfortunately, it's not been terribly reliable. It stalls a lot. There are some concerns about whether we're moving patients in the most appropriate and safe fashion. So we went and looked at John Deere, Kubota, Polaris, and Kawasaki. Unfortunately, right now you can't really get a whole lot of anything. But the Polaris dealership did say that their unit they thought would ship at the end of October, beginning of November. What we looked at was to try to find something where we could safely perform fire and rescue operations. So we looked at the Polaris 1000 Premium. The Premium just gives us power steering, which makes it a lot easier when you're trying to navigate with people. It also gives you a little bigger tires and a little higher elevation, skid plates, all that good stuff. In the back, what we tried to find was something that instead of having to load and unload water and load and unload a skid, a combined unit, and there's a company called Q-Tac that makes these. This unit carries 30 more gallons than what we currently carry. It carries 80 or 85 gallons of water. And on top of that, it has a skid where we can put the basket, safely secure patients, and move them to and from, reducing any risk of injury to them or our staff. And with the purchase of this, we would need to purchase a bigger trailer, which is fine because our old trailer is in need of some serious welding repairs. So the officers during the meeting came up with the Polaris with the Q-Tac and the purchase of a new trailer that should be just under $26,000. And we'd like to move forward with that replacement. Once the new one is in service, you'll see a surplus come in to get rid of the Kawasaki mule and just put it on Gov Deals. Because I'm sure it's going to have, just like our old gear that we get rid of, it'll have value to somebody. I'm not sure what that value is going to be. But that's the request for Resolution 2121.
Yeah, you answered my question. I was gonna ask you what you were gonna do with the old ones, but thank you.
Yes.
Is there a state purchase
Yeah,
for this that we can get at least that?
this is state pricing.
That's what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
It actually, state pricing, I believe, saved us, yeah, $1,000 off of,
All the vendors did the same $1,000 off.
Okay. Doesn't matter if you buy the John Deere or the Polaris, it's $1,000. Gotcha. All right.
Okay, is there a motion for resolution 21-21?
You have that motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Gauntner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Excuse me. Resolution number 21-22 is a resolution authorizing the chief of the Madison Fire District to purchase a DJI Mavic drone in an amount not to exceed $8,000 and authorizing payments provided therein. Again, I'll defer to the fire chief.
so this was brought up a year ago. I believe it was in September of last year. We had talked about, and ironically, it would have really come in handy if we bought it last year. Because we could have used it quite a bit. If you recall, last year, we came to the board and wanted a $5,000, resolution for $5,000 to buy this drone. Part of the component of the drone and having a team here is that to use it in business or in public safety, you have to be licensed. We were working with somebody to put on a class for us, so our folks were prepped and could become licensed because you have to be basically an FAA Part 107. You have to have an aviator's license essentially that talks about charting and where you can fly and how to fly. And with COVID, we weren't able to do the class, and since we weren't able to do the class, there was no point in having a drone. After this year, how many times were we on the river? It was 3 times on B shift. So we pulled more people off the river this year than we have in several years. We've looked for missing children. One of the things we talked about again in the officers' meeting was where does this stand? I was able to secure the classes for that FAA Part 107. When I went back and looked at the drone to look at availability, the drone that we could have purchased a year ago for $5,000 is discontinued. There still is an option to buy that drone if they still have them available. However, you would be buying old technology. The change in price was due to significant changes made in the thermal imaging camera. There's additional batteries. The flight time is a little bit longer, and it also comes with a DJI insurance plan that basically means if we wreck, the drone itself is about $6,900. The rest of the stuff, the rest of the pieces, parts, add on to that, bring it up to that almost $8,000. Essentially, the manufacturer has an insurance policy that you can get as public safety. So if we crash the drone, it basically is replaced with a $500 deductible. So in discussion with the officers meeting, that was something that we thought we should move forward with. We also reached out to law enforcement. 2 village officers were interested in the class. And I know I talked to Mr. Best earlier, and one of the things we had discussed was the number of people that would have access. And one of the things with the drone that has to happen when using for business and public safety is anytime that thing goes in the air, there has to be 2 pilots. You have to have somebody that visualizes the aircraft and somebody that flies the aircraft. So when we look at how many people we're going to try to get licensed to do such, right now we're looking at between 12, probably 12 and 13 people, because numbers that are smaller may leave us with a pilot, but not the second pilot, so that we can navigate it to within the requirements. I'd be happy to answer any other questions if you have them.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Chief, you mentioned that the drone there's a special insurance policy that covers the drone if we crash it. Is that part of this additional cost, or is that? And I'll tell you why I'm asking that. I'm reading the minutes from the August 18th, 2020 meeting where we approved the purchase of the drone for $5,000. And in there, it says, per Mr. Gary, this drone is covered under the district's policy and casualty policy at no additional cost while being operated by district personnel on duty. So I was wondering, is part of that $8,000, is there some money we have to pay for coverage of that drone, or is that something the company's throwing in, or is that something we can save a few bucks on because per our minutes of last year, Gary said that the drone was covered under our policy.
So that's the way they typically do these is they make packages. Like I can tell you from the recreational side of things, they have a package called Fly More, which comes with additional batteries. Batteries for these things are almost $300 a piece.
Okay.
So what they do is they try to package things together. That insurance part is part of this package that we're looking at, which is called the Urban Rescue Package, I believe it was. I talked to a gentleman from California to try to identify what fit us best. I think the most significant change in cost is there's an additional battery, so there's a $300 thing. They throw in the insurance. I'm not sure what that costs. But the thermal imaging, the technology now versus the old unit is probably where the biggest cost comes. The next step up, and that was one of the things that I talked with Mr. Best about earlier, that like the next step up from this is a $35,000 drone.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. The county does have a couple of those. I know they have one less than they used to. It apparently is.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
The other thing, Mr. Chairman, if I was looking at last year's minutes on the purchase, and the board had directed that the drone not be lent out to other departments and only be used by our employees. Is that still?
Yeah, the only thing that we did was we reached out to Village PD. I know Detective Doyle is part of the county team.
Yeah.
So there's a pilot there. I reached out to Chief McIntosh because I know that there's a village officer who actively has a drone and flies and is very familiar. So I did reach out to law enforcement to kind of see if, probably not as a pilot, because I would prefer they not be a pilot, but if there's a police officer that can stand there and watch it in the sky while our folks fly it, that helps us meet that requirement to having 2 people.
Okay.
But no, I would definitely, I'm not interested in, I'd be happy to take it somewhere and use it with our folks to help the neighboring communities.
Yeah,
But
I don't have a problem with that either. It's just.
but I don't think that it's going, nobody but a Madison person should be piloting said drone. And I did find there's a couple of drones that I looked at. There's one specifically that's about $100. And at the recommendation of the couple people I talked to, that's the learning drone.
That's when
So
you can crash into a tree or something.
So, yeah, and they actually make some drones that are relatively indestructible. So those are the ones that you have people practice on before they fly these. But if it makes the board comfortable, I can tell you, I have one, Brian has one, we probably have 6 or 8 people that have this same model. It's not got the thermal imaging, but we have many people in the department that are already pretty familiar with the operation. We've each crashed our own at least once.
Well, I've seen the pictures you produced off of your drone, and they're pretty impressive. Just what your drone's capable of doing.
So the camera on this drone is the same camera. It is a 48 megapixel camera. It shoots 4K video. The most impressive part about this drone is the thermal imaging compared to the drone in previous generations. And some of the thermal imaging cameras for these drones themselves are $6,000, $8,000, $10,000.
I guess the big issue with thermal imaging, if I understand it correctly, is let's say you get a call and there's a young child that's lost in the woods or in a cornfield or something like that, and it's nighttime. You can fly the drone up, and that thermal imaging camera will help locate them. Is that basically the purpose of that?
Yeah, so I did try to use mine at one point for some folks on the river. I don't have thermal imaging, and what happens when you don't have thermal imaging and you're flying with a camera, you are literally flying in the dark. Mm-hmm. These, just so you know, these also have, these are pretty intuitive pieces of equipment. Like, for instance, I believe the one that we're looking at has 9 cameras for collision avoidance. Wow. Like, I can tell you I wrecked mine once, and I took it out of the normal mode because it goes faster in the sport mode. And in the sport mode, I think Lieutenant Fallhammer's familiar, in the sport mode you bypass the safeties, and it travels about 45 miles an hour. And if you lose sight of it because you don't have somebody watching it like I did and hit trees. But if you fly these in the normal mode, they essentially are collision proof. And the thermal imaging opens the door to nighttime.
Right.
And you have to file an exception with the FAA to do that, but that's all part of the process. But that thermal imager will allow you to do nighttime search and rescue if you need to.
That's where I think the value of this piece of equipment is, like, or you have a boat out in the lake that's maybe capsized and it's getting dark, and you can fly out there and locate them, or again, a young child in the woods, or somebody lost in the woods or the river. That's a great tool to have in the toolbox.
The other thing that this has that the other one didn't is a mission mode. So if you need to do searches, you can essentially this also comes with a smart controller, which the other one didn't. You can basically draw a circle around the area you want to search, and the drone will navigate itself. It'll take up to 240 waypoints. So basically, it will do the grids. You tell it where you want it to search, and it will do the grid search. The part that I like about it is, say we're on the water looking for somebody and we can't find them, or in the woods looking for somebody and we can't find them. At the end of your search, you can actually save your search pattern. That can be imported into our ERS, our reporting system. So if a week from now they end up finding somebody and they question what you did, you actually have GPS documented coordinates of where your search pattern was. So it kind of protects you from some liability standpoint too. But this can also be used at fires. You could put it up at a fire. You can watch the heat signature in a building to identify where issues might be. There's a lot of practical application.
I'm just gonna say, with your limited staff, I'm finding it difficult to see where you're gonna have two guys operating a drone and who's fighting the fire. Okay, I mean, you see where I have a problem. I have several problems with this. I'm uncomfortable, one, budgetary wise, when we're looking at the manpower that we need. And I know this is only $8,000, but, you know, you have to start someplace. Also, what I don't know is, who and what other departments have this type of equipment surrounding them,
So right now, the county has a team.
right? Okay, as you said.
I'm not aware of anybody else. Are you aware of anybody else that has?
One in Windsor, but I don't believe it has,
Oh, yeah, Windsor does, yeah.
doesn't have the,
But from a fire standpoint, just to kind of answer your questions, this is probably something that, so first of all, if we have a fire, manpower is not a problem, because we have Geneva, Harpersfield, Thompson. So at the time you get to putting a drone up is a time where you're going to have the resources. I will tell you, from a search and rescue standpoint, putting a drone out over the water to identify where your patient is, or if there's a patient, potentially not putting a crew on the water, because you can go out and investigate, from land. And the bigger part with the river, I mean, the manpower that it takes to do a search, a drone at 200 feet can cover, I can tell you, I used mine for a search for a missing kid about 3 years ago up off south of Appaloosa, and it was in the fall, so there was no leaves. And I probably covered 20 acres in the time that a police officer walked, a quarter of a mile. So from a staffing I understand where you're coming from. I can tell you from a staffing standpoint, one drone, and yes, 2 people piloting it, can probably outwork 10 people, depending on the application.
Well, and then how is, again, does this have some type of beacons on it that at night you can visualize this?
Yeah, so this guy has, do you have that thing? So this character is interesting. It has a speaker that we can put on it. So in the email I sent, there's a speaker that mounts on it. So basically, you can be flying, saying, come to an open area so that we can see you, whatever, you can communicate with them. It's got spotlights, so if it's nighttime, I can put spotlights on it, and I can fly using spotlights so that I can look and see things. It has a beacon, which meets the FAA requirements to fly at night. And then there's this other goofy light that adapts to the speaker light so that you can do 2 things at one time. So it is it's pretty adaptable. But I do understand your concerns.
Yeah, it's like, I understand its uses, and now I know that, there's no other supporting staff. We're not like Geneva's got the ladder truck and Perry's got the boat, and we have the drone they don't have. Neither one of those has any
No.
of that type of equipment.
No, and right now, everybody in the county depends on the county. I mean, the county has a team. So I know from the last issue that we had, which was a young girl that was lost in Thunder Hill, by the time the county team got there, we'd already found her. So this, to me, is again one of those things where we can at least initiate a process and identify we need more resources, or we can take care of the problem
You
ourselves.
found her because of a drone?
A drone and a 4-wheeler.
then we found the other 2 on Harpersfield using that drone on another call.
Yes, yeah, we did.
I can tell you, I was there on that scene. Captain Salto requested for the Lake County drone to come out to County Line, and that was how we got, or located the 2 individuals.
At night.
At night.
They glowed like they,
Minimal staffing,
yeah.
having that, your staffing can be more efficient with that technology. than just
Absolutely.
putting people up and down, especially the river and the banks.
Right.
I don't know why, everybody from out of town that came up to the Grand River this year, we had to rescue off the river.
Well, people are not, they're not staying inside. They-
There was, but there was nobody from Madison that was ever pulled off the river.
They're going for a ride, taking their kayaks, you know? Yeah.
Nobody, everybody from Madison knew we had way too much rain.
Okay, that's all I have.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something, because again, I'm sitting here looking at the minutes from last year's meeting, and we already approved the purchase of this drone at $5,000. Joanne, was that money was set aside then already?
Sitting there for,
So we only really have to come up with another $3,000. We don't have to come up with $8,000, because we've already authorized 5, and you've got that money sitting there. I just think, again, you know, we were talking about buying a boat a couple years ago.
I still want to buy a boat.
Well, I'm not sure, you know.
That's a
at least-
manpower problem.
Yeah, but we bought a what we did is we bought a jet ski instead, and then we got the drone. So between the jet ski and the drone, we can find people now out in the lake, which I think is a lot cheaper than buying a boat, in my opinion. I mean,
Well, and the neighbors on both sides have boats.
well, exactly, so I don't really need a boat. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to approve Resolution 2122, because we're only talking another $3,000 over what we've already authorized a year ago.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any,
Well, then I'm gonna just raise a question.
Sure.
Since this is at 8,000, what's this, you know, could we scratch this and make it 3,000? Since we've already approved
The 5,000.
5,000 year before?
Well, I mean, I think that you're already clarifying on the record that you are not any longer authorizing the purchase of the $5,000 drone, which Chief Baker has already indicated has become obsolete and isn't available.
Right.
So as long as it's clear in passing this resolution, I mean, that previous one was done by a motion, and I think you're just indicating that this is the drone that you want to purchase and that it shouldn't exceed the 8,000. So I think to not confuse the issue, you know, you don't want to say only 3,000 and then have to refer back to minutes later on.
Well, I guess my question then, is that 5,000 sitting somewhere?
yeah, we still have it in the reserve.
That was the question I asked.
Is it a line?
It's in, not in our line, we had it still left in unappropriated, when he left.
Okay, so
It's still in.
it could be used by something else. Or,
Yeah, it's just in the general fund, right, Joanne?
oh, okay,
Yeah.
Unappropriated monies.
right.
okay. Then I'm fine with the 8.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lee,
Yes?
Mr. Vest,
Yes, this time.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Gontner.
Yes.
We'll see. Let's see how it acts.
Okay, move on to resolution 21-23. Ms. Clapp.
This is, resolution number 21-23, is a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. This is the one that we receive every year from the Lake County auditors after we have their budget.
Move for passage.
I'm sorry,
I'll move for passage.
is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question, if I could.
Yes.
Joanne, under Schedule B, I'm just want to make sure I understand this right. So we're actually running the district off of what, 5 levies, 5 different levies, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, just want to understand that, okay.
Mr. Lee, you had something?
No, my question was the same as Mr. Gontner's.
Mr. Vest?
I'm good, thank you.
No further discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Gontner.
Yes.
And Mr. Lee.
Yes?
Further new business.
We'll move into the chief's report, Mr. Baker, Chief Baker.
Yes, thank you, sir. Anniversaries, firefighter Aaron Tennant finished 6 years, firefighter Jesse Sopko 5, firefighter Joe Romisher 4, firefighter Nick Law, and firefighter Corey Baker 3. Financial overview, as Joanne brought up, looks good. Our tax revenue, we're about 5% over what we budgeted. Our EMS revenue is about 5% over what we would project year to date. Overtime, when you look at the spreadsheet, you'll see that overtime is still way out of line with where we need to be. But if you look at the overview of staffing and salaries, we're about 10% under budgeted for total staffing dollars. So while we're spending it on overtime, it's still within where we plan to be. Call volume for August was ridiculous, 32% over what we did in 2021, and if you 2020, and if you averaged the last 3 years together to kind of compensate for COVID, we were still 28% over the average of the last 3 years. Fire inspections are going well. Lori has been helping Captain Sopko and Inspector Salamosi catch up on some of those past due. I think Joanne, you mentioned we're about $400 to the good now.
Correct. We budgeted $9,500, and we're at $9,950 collected.
So we're getting there, and I'd like to commend Lori because she's come in and tackled that like it's her job, and she's doing a great job with it. Vehicles, all the maintenance and stuff has been done. We had a couple of issues with the new fire truck that were warranty. Apparently Cummins has had some problems with different components of the engine. The officer recommendation we already talked about. The budget worksheet is there for your review. There's one thing highlighted in yellow that I did not get fixed. I have to go back and backtrack and see where the typo is. But otherwise, from a budget standpoint, we're doing well. The revenue's doing well. There's nothing that's really of significant concern. What I would point to you is on page 8, if you look at the run volume, you can see that pretty much since March, our volume's blown up. Again, I think I talked to you at the last board meeting. We had a review with Medi-Count. We're the highest reimbursement rate in Lake County right now, fire departments. And again, I think you have to commend these guys. Not only are they running their butts off and being busy, but they're doing a good job with documentation, and we're seeing the benefit of that in our reimbursements. Other than that, if there's any questions, I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to review it, but I think as of right now, with exception to staffing, I think right now we're in great shape.
Anyone have any questions for the chief?
Just one, and it had to do with collections on fire inspections.
Yes.
Okay, how we doing?
Oh, $400 over what we projected.
That's what she said.
Okay, I didn't get that. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I missed that.
And again, Lori is working with Captain Sopko and Inspector Salamosi, and she's been mailing out. We're gonna have to readjust our budget for mail because we're sending a bunch of certified letters, but we've captured a bunch of revenue that we hadn't captured. So we're moving in the positive direction.
Okay.
Mr. Gardner,
Yeah, if I could, Chief, I was just looking at your one graph here, the EMS billing by date. Just so I have a good understanding of this, the red line, that's the actual dollars billed. The green line is actual dollars collected. Is that
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. So we're not collecting everything we bill, but we're not doing bad either.
No, actually, like I said, you compare us to places like Kirtland and Willoughby, we have a higher collection rate than they do. This is one of the things I think in the past, I know previously, one of the things that has happened, and I haven't done it in 4 years, and I don't plan on doing it, was previously we would raise the rates and raise the rates and raise the rates that we charged. And the only thing that really does, and I'm not sure that it was ever explained to you, insurance companies are going to pay what they pay. So I can charge them $1,000 and they're going to pay me $300 and we write off $700, or I can charge them $1,500 and they're going to pay us $300 and we're going to write off $1,200.
Yeah.
So right now, that was one of the things with the Met account review, where our charges are, and I know we haven't raised them in 4 years, but there's really no benefit to changing that number. All that's gonna do is make that red line higher, and the green line's gonna be the same.
Yep. It's what they do with insurance. I mean, with health
Right.
insurance, the usual and customary, whatever they.
Correct.
I mean, I see my EOBs and it's like they charge, $2,000, but they only get 300.
Well, and I know previous chiefs, that was one of the things that our previous chief did is, like, every year or so, we adjusted the rate. But it really does not have an impact on the bottom line.
Well, and I think that's why when I look at the green line, it's pretty stable. It doesn't go up much and it doesn't go down much. It's just kind of, stays a pretty straight line, so.
And it's also kind of odd to look at it because it depends upon whether you're looking at it by date of service or by billing date. And you have to remember that some of these big jumps, it may be 30 to 60 days before we see, typically the reimbursement is 30 to 60 days out. So we're always lagging a little bit behind. That's why you see that it doesn't necessarily marry up. The red and green don't necessarily parallel.
Right. It's an interesting graph, though. I hadn't really looked at it closely till you were talking about your rate of collection, and it's kind of good to follow.
Any further questions for the chief? Okay, we'll move on to closing public portion. Chief, we have anybody?
There are no questions.
Okay, closing board comments, anybody?
I'd like to say you guys are doing a great job. Tell the men and ladies that they're doing great work for what you have to handle. Great job. That's all I can say.
Anybody else?
No, sir.
Okay, our next meeting, I want to mention, we're going to be having the special meeting on September 29th, which is a Wednesday at 7 PM. We're also going to have it put in the paper and everything.
Okay.
Okay, want to have that. And upcoming regular meeting will be October 20th, 2021 at 7 PM, and then one November 17th, 2021 at 7 PM. There's no further business. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
You have that motion?
Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Gontner?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Time is 8:08.
You want a picture?
I'll
their
take it,
cards?
yeah.
Yeah, with their cards.
I forgot mine too.
You
Well,
have
here.
to send it.
We'll take a picture, Mark and I with our library cards, and then we'll give you our library
And
cards.
you two can take a picture.
I do too, but I just don't have.
I believe you.
You're not gonna have to zoom in and read the name on the card.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think the name is on the card, or mine is it anyhow?
No, just Madison.
You got enough white space?
Oh, there we go.
I was gonna just take them off.
All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Take one more. Okay.
All right, let's pass it. There you go.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. Thank
All
you.
right, now she can be happy.
They will appreciate it.
Hey, Chief,
Yes, sir.
I will not be here for the 20th.
29?
No, the 20th,
Next month.
next month.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be in Cancun.
You suck.
I know.
Does he suck or what?
Okay.
Yeah. But I need something.
Do you have the
I
link?
have been
Email it
on
over.
the internet
Yeah,
and
email
all
it
over
to me.
eastern Lake
Yeah.
County
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to buy.
I'll make a
and
note
it's
to myself.
a mess.
Yeah. Yep,
I
send me the
don't
link.
want them
Yeah, no
from you,
problem.
but could I buy them from the district? Well, we're gonna be down there for 10 days, so I'd like maybe half a dozen.
Keep me posted, Todd. As soon as you get information from CT, let me know.
Yeah, and when I get the email from this guy about him wanting to,
Yeah,
then
the
I'll
board,
send you the
yeah.
dispute.
Yeah, and